I looked at my firefighter and said, we got to drop our packs. We have to run. And the fire is right below us. I could feel the radiant heat coming up the hill. And I was like, we're going to have to deploy.
This is the Wildfire Lessons Podcast. Our goal is to promote learning by revealing the complexity and risk in the wildland fire environment. We share the lessons. The learning that follows is up to you. Hi, I'm Kelly Woods, Director of the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. On today's podcast, Travis Dotson from our staff visits with Chris Fry about his entrapment and eventual fire shelter deployment on the Mud Fire in Nevada in 2006. We'll hear Chris recount this experience and talk about how it shaped him in his career and personally. To learn more about the Mud Fire, visit our website, wildfirelessons.net, and search Mud Fire. That's MUDD Fire. Here you'll find links to various reports and a video which will provide some additional context to Chris's experience. Let's listen to Chris's story and try to put yourself in his boots on that day.
Hello, Travis Dotson here, analyst at the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. Today, we're going to hear from Chris Fry. Chris, you want to give us a little bit of who you are and what we're doing today?
Yeah, sure. Currently, I'm detailed as an acting assistant director for the Lessons Learned Center. My day job is a assistant district fire management officer on the Angeles National Forest. 2006, I was involved in a fire shelter deployment burnover, and wanted to chat a little bit about some of the lessons I learned on that and some of the things that came out of that incident, burn protocol, and a couple of other good things, some silver linings to the dark clouds there.
Let's get into it. Why don't you kind of give us the background of kind of building up to that? How did you end up on that assignment, that kind of stuff?
At the time of the incident, I was working for BLM, signed to an engine module out of Bakersfield District. I think it's called the SenCal District now. So I'll start off with the beginning of our fire season that year. My engine module leader, the captain on the engine, had decided to take a job with Fighting Fire for Department of Defense. So that left a gap. We did not have a module leader. I think at the time I was an engine boss trainee, and so I wasn't able to run the module. But we also had one of the hotshot squad bosses that was on the district's hotshot crew. He needed some engine time, and he wanted to work on his engine skills. So early in the season, they put him out and got his engine boss finished, put him in a 120-day detail into the engine captain position. I was the engine operator for the engine, and then it was a Type 6, and it was not the nice Type 6s that we have now. It was a single cab stick shift. Whoever sat in the middle was extremely uncomfortable, especially when we went anywhere on a long road trip to a fire. But because trying to build the module and get experience, our AFMO at the time tried to send us out on as many fires as we could, and in many assignments as we could, to get our engine quals refined. That year, beginning of the season, man, we were on every roll. It was just back to back to back. I'm going to tell you this quick story because it'll tie in later. That year, the Six Rivers and the Shasta Trinity had been all on fire, and we were sent up there as a single engine. And we got there, and the incident really had no use for us, so they kicked us to the local forest, and we went to the Six Rivers Ruth District, or Mad River District, out of Ruth. For those of you who don't know the Six Rivers, it's a very remote district.
Yeah.
So we go to cover that district, and they put us at a guard station that was way out in the middle of nowhere, and we really had nothing to do. So we did a lot of training. We did a lot of fire shelter drills. We broke into the engine's cache and found their practice shelters, and we ran up their PT hike hill up to the first bench, and we would practice getting into the shelters, and first one out had to do push-ups. Well, Trenton and I, my module leader, we weren't going to be the first one out. We didn't want to do the most push-ups. So our poor brand new rookie firefighter, every time I think he was up to about 700 or 800 push-ups that he owed us, which he ended up doing. So fast forward 2 more assignments, and we get called to go to cover. Northern Nevada was getting just a ton of lightning. They had multiple complex fires going up there, and we were sent on a severity request to go up and augment their resources. So So we get to the Elko dispatch, and they say, you're going to help staff the local resources here for the Elko BLM district, which I was pretty excited about. Prior seasons, I had worked down in Las Vegas, so I knew a couple of the folks up there. So I was pretty stoked, kind of some familiar territory of, that Great Basin, sagebrush. And so we're there one day, and we break a pretty big fire. So this whole fire season was kind of, when you talk about the phases of team building, we were past the form stage, obviously, but we'd been in and out of the storm phase as a module, and it was more between my module leader and myself. At the time, I was 7-8 years in as a firefighter, and I thought I knew it all. I was that guy who'd been there, seen that, done that, and retrospect, looking back, that caused a lot of friction between my module leader and myself. So we went on the Snow Canyon fire first day there, and we first time our engine performed. We were flawless. We had minimal resources. It was a 28,000 acre fire by the time it was done, and we burned I don't know how many miles of road, just a Type 6, a Type 4, and a NDF inmate crew to hold. That was basically what we had.
Isn't that I love that assignment. You know what I mean? You got firing and not that many resources, and it's just fun.
Oh man, it was fun. It's the first time we get there right off the bat, and my firefighter had never done a mobile attack. We cut the fence, and we're starting to right when we get on the fire, and we start doing a mobile attack, and you could see he looks back at me in the truck, and I could see he's out in front of me, and he's got just the smoke in his face. He's like gagging. He's got the snot running down his nose, but he's got a huge smile on his face.
Yeah.
He's having so much fun. And then, we did I think a 24-hour shift on that before we got resources to relieve us, and we passed out in some rancher's pond, right by his pond, just to get some sleep. And man, we were performing. That was awesome. So
good times.
Yeah, well, it was. So we go down to meet our 2-to-1, and we come back to Elko, and they have us cover the Carlin station, and not even 3 hours into covering their station, the mud fire breaks out. It started north of Elko in the Snow Bowl ski resort. So the drive in was a long drive in to get there. I mean, I think the response was 45 minutes from Carlin station, maybe even longer. It seemed like it was a long drive. And we tie in with the IC via radio, and he tells us to go to the Snow Bowl ski resort and tie in with the division group soup there. And there was 4 engines that we were all covering the district. We all were out of Carlin there. We had a Type 4 from Carson City BLM, the Type 4 from local Elko engine, and then we had a Type 6 from either Arizona Strip or somewhere further south there. And we were kind of almost like a task force, and throwing together task force. And the module leader from the Elko engine was acting as a task force leader. He brought his chase truck, and he was in the chase truck. And
sure.
So we tie in with the division group soup, and he says, "Hey, look what you can do out in front of this thing. We want to keep this from going into the town of Elko. Let's see if you can find some roads to fire off of, and see if we can either corral this thing away from Elko or stop it."
Standard Elko protocol, right? Every time you go out there, it's like find a
road and fire it off.
Yeah.
So just by happenstance, we did an RTO with all the engines, and we ended up being the first one to head out in front of this thing, and we came to this large junction of maze spiderwebbed dirt roads out there, and we kind of scouted out because the other Type 4s were still pretty far behind us. At this point, the fire's it's doing what it's doing, and it's kind of just eating through the sage. Nothing crazy fire behavior wise was going on. It was making uphill runs towards the ski resort, and that was about it. My module leader, myself, and my firefighter did a little scouting, and we took a look, and some of these roads were like, man, this is not good. This is a lot of acreage, a lot of to burn off of and try to hold with what we got here. So we went back to the main junction, and the module leaders, actually all the engines, we all jumped out, and module leaders had a discussion on what we were going to do, our tactics, and they made a decision collectively, the module leaders, to jump in the chase truck and task force leader's vehicle and go up and find a place where we could anchor in and start firing. So we're waiting. I'm talking with engine operator from Elko. I knew him. We'd worked the season prior together. He'd come down and helped us in Vegas. And so we just talking, and we get a call over the radio from the task force. They just say, hey, come up the road. And we found a pretty good spot. I got eyes on you guys. I could see you guys coming up, and so we jump in the trucks. And I, again, because where I was positioned to lead the task force up, and so we start up this canyon road.
What time of day are we talking about here? It's an afternoon sometime, right?
So I think it was about 2:00 is when the fire started. By the time we got on scene, it was about 1,500 or so.
Okay.
And so by the time we had already tied in, we're bumping around this. It's probably about 1,600, and the fire's gaining pretty good steam. I think it was probably 5,000 acres, 6,000 acres at the time. And so we start heading up this canyon road. They were looking up at some of these ridge tops, and all of a sudden, as we're driving up, I see fire coming up through a little saddle out my window. I'm like, what? The main fire should be ahead of us. Why do we have fire looking out my driver's side window? Why do I have fire over here? Didn't compute. I got on the radio, and the Elko engine was the last engine in the back at the time. And I radioed the operator, said, hey, you see that out our window? And he goes, yeah. Where'd that come from? Something like that. And we're going up a canyon road narrow canyon road that's gonna go up to the top of the ridge eventually. And I'm like, man, we didn't sit right with us. So we end up making the decision to over the radio with the other engine operators that we're going to turn around and head back to the junction, the safety zone. What we didn't know is a thunderstorm, 20 to 30 miles to the west of us had collapsed, and just those outflow winds just started throwing fire everywhere. Our situational awareness had been completely cut off. It's in August in Elko. It's 110 degrees outside. And we're on a dusty road getting dusted out by the trucks. So we've got our windows up and the air conditioners on. We're in a pretty sheltered canyon at that point in time. Mm-hmm. So we didn't know what was going on around us just because of with the weather, just because we didn't have that situational awareness. Mm-hmm. So about the engines were allowed to, I'll never forget, because when I found it on the topo map, it was Mule Springs. So it was just a little spring area that was the engines could turn around. I'd already passed it. I told the operator on the Elko engine, I said, all right, I'm going to go up the road and find a place to turn around, and I'll meet you guys back there. And I come across the road. I finally find a decent spot to turn around. And I turn around, and as I'm coming back down around a bend, I see there's fire below me now. The fire had blown across the road at that point and was chasing the other three engines back out towards their safety zone. Mm. So I'm like, great, man. I got my primary safety zone is cut off. While we were driving up the canyon, I noticed there was a repeater site. I just happened to see it, going up, and I could tell where it was, and I could see it now. I'm like, okay, I don't know why I filed that in the back of my mind. Mm-hmm. So I asked the operator on the Elko engine, I said, hey, do you think I can get through that? He goes, I don't know, man. Contact the Carson City engine and see what they say. And I tried to contact them and couldn't get a hold of them. So this time, meanwhile, I'm trying to try to contact my module leader on, they're using the main fires using SOA, scene of action, not the main BLM TAC frequency. And it is just jammed with radio traffic, and I'm not getting through to them. So I'm like, man, I looked at my firefighter, said we need to get up there to where they're at, where our module leader's at now. This is not a good spot to be in. So we turned back around. But
you have to make that decision, because this is a thing that occurs. But what you were asking that engine was, can I drive kind of through that fire, kind of like how deep is it, or how hot is that? What you were asking that other engine?
Correct. Yeah, I was trying to see if I could make it through and get through back down to where our safety zone was.
Yeah, and even just that in itself is like, because most of us have been in a scenario where you take a moment and you pause and you go, I could probably get through there, even maybe the fire hasn't crossed yet or whatever, and it's this decision, but it's so. I don't know, just that moment is brutal, right? You know what I mean? Because nobody can actually help you make that decision. But you also know, like, clock is ticking, man. Like, if you're going to do it, it's probably better right now than.
And I was definitely, the clock was ticking. I was definitely getting closer to that small side of the time wedge. There was no doubt about it. I was past that, analytical decision making point 100%.
Something made you decide you had to turn around and go back up, because you still had clear road behind you at the moment.
Correct. At the moment, yeah. And my gut told me I needed to turn back around. So I turned back around, and we're climbing out of that canyon, getting up towards the ridge top, and I see the fires just completely blown across in front of me, and I'm going, I can't see what's gone behind the ridge, and let alone did I not even know where the modulators were, exactly. I had an idea. And they weren't communicating with us. And I come to find out later, the reason why I wasn't getting any communication from them was because they were getting hit hard by fire, and they were in the process of firing out around their safety zone just so that they could have a bigger buffer. So finally, Trenton, or my modulator, gets a hold of me. He says, "Chris, do not come up the road." And I go, "I'm already committed, dude." He's trying to tell me to do stuff, and I said, "Hey, I'm running out of options. I need to think here. I need to be able to figure out better my situation." And I noticed a 2-track. And I'm talking a true 2-track up a spur ridge that is like a guy with a Suzuki Samurai or a Jeep is going up to go hunting. Not suitable necessarily for a Type 6 engine. I go, that's my only option. That was the only option I had left to select. And so made the decision that, it's more survivable up on the ridge than it's going to be down here. So let's get up on that ridge. So we start up the 2-track, crawling up 4 low, and it's real rocky, typical, for that area. By this time I had my windows rolled down. I wanted to see figure out what the wind was doing. And I hear the sound that no operator wants to hear, and that's the sound of air escaping your tires.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that is just, I can literally feel it because, oh man, I was a division trainee on the Wallow Fire, and we were like, I was getting everybody off the division, and I was, making the sweep, coming in. Yep. And so we're getting everybody off the division because, it's not going to hold. Right. And so I'm sweep, everybody else is out in front of me, and the same thing happened. Boom. And it's like, oh, it gives me the chills to this day. Like, we're trying to get everybody out, and now I have a flat tire. But, in my case, it's because I had one of those rentals with the, those awful tires.
Yeah. Half-ball tires. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it's just that sinking feeling. But I mean, your situation is like, now you've got another, talk about a sand table exercise where it's like, oh, and now you have a flat tire and you got to make another decision, right?
I just kept going on it. I was like, there's no way we can stop. We need to get at the top of the ridge. We get to the top of the ridge, and I see how the 2-track just dives off back to the south towards that. And I watch it, and I follow it right towards that repeater site. And I'm like, we need to get there. Our primary escape route's been cut off. Our secondary one's been cut off. Now this is the last chance. There's no other option at that time.
And things have to happen quickly in that moment, right? It's not like you have this time to be like, well, let me evaluate some other options. It's just like you see something, and it's just like, I think we've all been there in one way or another, but I can totally feel that where you're just like, you follow it out and you see that's where we're going. Bam, decision made. That is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. On the rims if needed.
Exactly. And that's the way it was going to be. And so I they never teach you in Engine Academy, and I never was taught when I became an operator. They teach you, always have your vehicle parked out so that you can make a quick escape. But, they never really mention what are you going to do if your means of getting to a safety zone is your vehicle, because you are in your vehicle driving into a fire or driving to where you're going to be working for the day. They don't really prepare or train you for that. Now, when I'm driving into a fire, especially initial attack, I'm noting every possible road, safety zone going in there, or area that if something turns south, I can go back to that, and I just never was taught that. I don't know if you were, but that never to me was hammered into me as an engine operator.
Yeah, for sure. You're it's like a lot of things, right? Our courses teach us lots and lots of good stuff. And there just by the nature of it, there's a bunch of assumptions built into them. You know what I mean? And it's in these stories that we reveal some of those things. It's just like, when people started really sharing fire shelter deployment stories, it's in those moments that we start to hear some of the things about, well, it doesn't actually fold out the way that that the practice shelter does or whatever, what I mean? It's only and it's that same thing of there's like, hey, we talk a lot about parking your vehicle ready to go. But then what's next? What's the next step of like, okay, now you did it and you're in your vehicle and you're driving away. Like that's the extent of the training.
Exactly. No, it really is.
You're gonna make it away.
When I became a engine module leader, engine captain, that was something I impressed upon both my engine, my AFEO and my FEO, and I also had a water tender at my station. And it was, man, I always wanted to quiz them on that. And I'm sure I told them why eventually, but I'm sure they were wondering, why the heck is he always asking me all these questions? Just because I was trying to get them to be aware, and I think that's a module leader's job. I mean, once you get to that level, you realize that, and that you're that's something you're doing subconsciously. But I really wanted to, get those operators to think about that, especially because my module leader wasn't there, and so my biggest fear was like, okay, my operator goes and goes to refill his tank, and he gets in a sticky situation. I want to be able to think for himself and be able to problem solve and come out with a good outcome. But
yeah, again, that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we talk about it in tactical decision game world where it's like, oh, your crew supervisor is not there, and so now you have to make the tough decision. That's real, man. That stuff happens, right? Because like all of a sudden that's what you're doing. You're making all the decisions. You even had to tell your engine captain, hey man, you kind of need to leave me alone because you're not going to help me.
Exactly.
I'm in it right now.
Right.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah, it definitely. And at the time, I think back at it was everything happened so quickly, and yeah, the adrenaline is rushing. But I remember thinking with a lot of clarity, like, okay, I was pulling every slide from my carousel that I had lessons learned from other fires. I mean, and so I think that definitely helped me, with option selections. It opened up some option selections a little wider than if I hadn't done that. When I got up to the top of the ridge, I'm like, man, there's a safety zone. We're going to make this, and that definitely, I thought we were golden. And then I get stuck in the sand up at the top of the ridge. Oh. And that flat tire is not helping. And I'm trying to maneuver my way out of it. And there was a rock escarpment there right off the road. And all of a sudden, feel the back end of the engine just get sucked downward. I'm trying to like gun to get out of it, and my wheels are just spinning. I'm like, what the heck? What happened now? And I jump out of the engine. I noticed I'm high centered. The rock gave way underneath my on the passenger side and gave way underneath the dual, and just high centered it on the pumpkin, the rear diff. And it was at that point, that was where my mindset meant we're going to make it to no, we need to. This is going to be a survival moment, not a. We need to get to that repeater site moment. We're good. That's where I really started feeling it.
And was it like immediately, like once you saw it was high centered, it was just like, okay, this is a new level of difficulty.
100%, because I'm looking through a saddle and then up a short jaunt up to the top of the ridge where the repeater site is. It was, I think they clocked it. It was just less than a mile that we were going to have to hike it to there. It was not great. So here you go, option selection. I'm thinking, okay, I'm on a rock on knob. I'm not in a saddle at this point. I'm just coming into a saddle. I'm looking at the fire below me, and that's kind of burning away from me. But also the main fire, that's what's coming towards me. That's what's about to hit me now. That the actual main portion of the fire that we were actually going to go fire out on. So my first instinct is, all right, I told my firefighter, I said, fire up the pump. Actually, I fired up the pump for him. I said, grab the nozzle. I'm going to try to see if I can get burnout around this engine and give us a safety zone. Mm-hmm. And we're at top of the ridge, man. The grasses weren't as abundant as they were down below. And nothing was taking. The winds weren't in our favor. Fire was too, in hindsight, thinking about it, fire was too far away to even get sucked into itself. Sure. And at that point, when I realized it wasn't working, I said, we're going to have to make this hike on foot to the safety zone. There's no other way around it. Made the decision. I said, I told my firefighter, I said, load your pockets with fusees. When the time's right, we're going to drag fire, bring fire with us, and we're going to bring it all the way to the safety zone. That was my thought. Mm-hmm. And we start trying to anchor off this big rock outcropping that was there, and we start trying to drag fire with us. And again, it's not the right time. The timing's not correct. The winds weren't in our favor, and the fuels just weren't taken. And so I kind of abandoned that. I said, you know what, Austin, we just need to book it. I think we can still make it.
For sure.
So,
and oh man, that thing about lighting, I've heard it at least 2 other times where people, like, in their mind they're gonna wag dodge it, right?
Yep.
Like that's the thing they're gonna do, and then you go to light it, and it doesn't do the thing that you're thinking, which is like, oh, insta black, like, you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't happen.
And that honestly, I tried it one more time as one of my last ditch efforts, that same thing. So I mean, once we started booking it, I realized the fire's getting closer. We're not going to make it to the repeater site. I did try to wag dodge it. I went to the other side of the ridge and lit a fire with my drip torch. I still had that with me, and it took, but it wasn't like, like you see with, like, wag dodge style, where it just took in a nice big circle and you could just walk right into it. It was like narrow fingery going down the slope, but it wasn't growing in size big enough where I felt that it was going to be a safety zone, or you just step into it. So that was my aha moment, that I was like, you know what, I looked at my firefighter, so we got to drop our packs. We have to run. We have to make it up at least out of the saddle as far as we can get. And we dropped our packs. I told my firefighter to take his gloves, his fire shelter, and his radio, and ditch his fusees out of his pants pockets, which he did. He ditched his fusees, took his radio. His gloves were still there, and I was not in the safety officer mindset of, I need to check to make sure he has his gloves. I'm doing the same with my stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And so as soon as we dropped our packs, man, it was like Carl Lewis, and I may be dating myself, but it was like a sprint up that hill. And so as we're running up the hill towards where the repeaters are, out of the saddle on the ridge there, there was like a false peak right before it. It was at the false peak, and I thought we were there. We weren't, and the fire was right below us. I could feel the radiant heat coming up the hill, and I was like, we're gonna have to deploy. We're not gonna be able to make it. We were within like 600 yards of making it to the repeater site.
Oh, what a brutal call. But it's just like and it keeps changing, right? You keep having to say, okay, we're going to do this. No, now we have to do this. Now we have to, like, the decision making never stops.
And what's funny is, I think we as firefighters think we're good at decision making when it comes to fire, and we can corral fire and we can tame fire. I think no, man, fire dictates 100% our decision making, what we're going to do. We may have moments that we're successful in that, but man, fire's unpredictable. Weather's unpredictable. So I think that's something that we really need to drive home to our new firefighters, is that just because you saw something and something was successful, that doesn't mean that it's going to be successful next time. And
maybe what we're good at is reacting to fire, because you at least what you're doing in those moments is you are recognizing the situation that you're in. Yeah, right. It's not ideal and you're not in charge, but your reactions matter too, because you could have gotten committed to something and not altered your decision based on the conditions at hand, right? And that's it. That's an important skill. Just because you're not driving it doesn't mean that there isn't benefit in being able to be nimble and react.
Right, resiliency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I made the decision. Hey, we got to deploy. I put a little fire. There's some sparse ground. I put a little fire down on the ground with my drip torch. Tossed my drip torch as far as I could throw it, and I'm yelling at my firefighter. We got to deploy, and he's just kind of he's got that deer in the headlights look. Like, what are you telling me to do?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember my old hotshot soup is show him what right looks like. So I'm like, okay, well, let me show him why. I need to get him out of his trance, and I pull my shelter out. I'm trying to start open. I try to start open the cellophane, and because of my incident and Little Venus and also the New York Peak the incident. That was where the retrofit to the tabs of the fire shelter came in, because my tabs immediately broke off. So I had a little bit open. It opened it a little bit, but I had to take my glove off, shove my fingers in there, and rip the cellophane package off. And I did that, threw my glove underneath my armpit, and along with my radio, and I'm ripping it open. And immediately when I try to fan it out, the wind takes it, and it almost became a kite. And at that same time, the wind came up because the fire is just screaming at us at this point, and it took my hard hat and flipped it down the hill. And I'm like, crap, what am I going to do now? I got to get in the shelter. And so I go to the ground, I get in the shelter. Austin's just still, my firefighter, he's just still holding his shelter, and he's looking at me. He looks down into the green, looks at me, and looks into the green again, and just bolts. I go like where I'm going to get up to go chase after him, and I look, and the flames are just right below me, maybe 15, 20 feet below me. I get hit with radiant heat, a blast of radiant heat. I was like, I can't do this. I had to make the hardest and probably the hardest ethical decision in my life. Do I run after him in hopes that I can catch him and tackle him to the ground and put him in the shelter with me? Or do I ride this out and hope I can find him when I'm done?
Oh, and that is brutal, man. Brutal. Man,
to this day, when I think about it, it gives me, for a long time afterwards, it gave me nightmares. It's something that was a really tough decision that I had to make.
Yeah, and you have zero time.
No, not the time the door is closed at this point.
Yeah.
So, I end up, I'm still screaming at him, yelling at him, try to get him to get in his shelter, hoping that he's going to call back at me. I hear nothing. Almost instantly, the flaming front goes over me. I can feel the heat, and I'm like, man, I don't have a glove on my one hand because it dropped when I opened up the shelter. I grabbed my radio, brought it in, and this whole time I'd been in communication. I made an announcement over a command that two firefighters were deploying, roughly where we were. I tried to get air tankers, and actually at the time they had some seats that were working the fire and a couple helicopters. I tried to get them right before we dropped our packs. I'd pulled my GPS out and was trying to I couldn't get a lock on coordinates because I'd never pulled my GPS out, in Elko before. So it's taking forever. And back then it was those big bricks that we had. It wasn't this wazoo stuff that we have now. Yeah. And so I couldn't get a lock on, and I couldn't afford to waste time to wait for it. So I couldn't get the helicopters and the seats over to help slow this thing down. And so I grabbed the radio just because I wanted to have that in the shelter with me. I needed to have that communication link and I left my glove, and so I didn't have a glove on. I didn't have a helmet on, so I'm just doing my best to cover my head with one gloved hand. And if you read the report or see the videos and some of the burn injuries that happened, you'll see how why they happened because of not having the glove on. But this whole time I'm yelling and screaming for Austin. I was in the shelter. It seemed like, man, and I know everybody says this is to deploy to fire shelter. It seems like eternity, but it was anywhere between 16 and 18 minutes. And the reason why I say that is because by the time I made notification that I was going to deploy, my module leader had been sitting there with his watch and was counting down the minutes till I came back up out of the shelter and said that I was okay. And he was really getting worried. Wow. And it was a little over 18 minutes. And I say 16 to 18 because, the minute or so to get into the shelter and yell at Austin, give or take a minute or so. And I immediately got out. Actually, not immediately. I peeked. It was still hot. And I got out. I immediately went looking for Austin. By this time, the helicopter had come overhead and finally had found us. He actually was circling around the engine. The engine made it through. It was burned. It was charred, but scorched, I should say. Sides got scorched. The light bar was, melted, but the engine made it through. And a lot of people ask me, afterwards, why didn't you just stay with the engine? And I said, well, it's funny you say that. One of the slides I had in my head was an engine that was fighting a fire, 60 miles to the west and just outside of Winnemucca that sucked an ember into the cab and burnt to the ground on a mobile attack.
For sure.
And I didn't want to be in a barbecue. That was why I felt my comfort level and safety was I needed to get to that safety zone.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, so you see the picture of the engine that, like you're describing, it's okay. Don't forget that's after the fact, right? Like it's not right. Like you could see that, and like you're standing there, you just had a flat tire, now you're high centered, and now the fire's coming at you. That's a whole and you considered it, you fired up the pump, you tried to make some black and all that stuff. You had to make the decision with the scenario you're faced with, which is a wall of friggin' fire coming at you, and the terrain is not the terrain that they advise you to be in, right? So I could see when I saw that picture of the engine afterwards, I could see, there's all the folks with the 20/20 hindsight and go, well, they should have just sat in the cab of the engine, they would have been fine.
Yeah,
it's a hard thing to predict.
It is very hard, and sometimes those intangibles versus those tangible decisions that you make, they pan out. Sometimes they don't. And I didn't want to have it that's an untangible decision that it's 50-50, where tangibly, if I can get to that safety zone, actually get to a safety zone, that's where I want to be, you know?
Sure.
So,
and sitting, waiting for something to happen versus doing something. Oof, I'll take doing something almost every time.
Yeah, 100%. You know, trying to better my situation instead of kind of giving up. You know, so helicopter gets over and finds Austin, and I immediately just went into EMT mode and started treating him. He did get in his shelter, and I asked him afterwards. When we were in the burn center, we were fortunate enough that they put us in the same room together, and I said, what made you get in the fire shelter? And he looked at me and he said, I didn't want to do push-ups. All of those push-ups that we had done on the assignment prior, where he did 700 or 800 push-ups, that muscle memory, that repetition, that was the mother of all skill. That was what got him in there. And I thank God to this day that we had done that, and because that was what ultimately got him into the fire shelter. And I also asked him, I said, why did you run? And he goes, man, I honestly don't know. It complete, fight or flight took over for him. Mm-hmm. Afterwards, I look at it, analyzing it, we had some crew cohesion issues. Myself and the module leader there was a lot of friction going on. We still were in that storm coming into the perform phase. We had performed on the fire before and done it really well. We were in sync. We had that synergy, but we weren't there yet, and a lot of that was my maturity at the time, and I'm not going to speak for my module leader and what he thinks, but at the time, 8 seasons in, I'd seen some shit. I knew what I was doing, and I'm going to do it my way. So, and I also had that invincible, feeling, nothing like this is ever going to happen to me. Well, okay, it did. And that's a big takeaway. And when I talk to a lot of people about this is what's one big lesson that you took away from this? And I say, don't ever go into a situation thinking, oh, that'll never happen to me, because it can and it will. Hopefully that if it does, it's a minor, incident where it just knocks you upside the head and says, hey, I need to knock off thinking I'm invincible. I am very fallible, and so that's kind of one of the biggest takeaways I've ever had on this incident.
And it's a hard thing to implement too, right? Because it's like, we all understand that it's good to get humbled, but you hope that the humbling is not that extreme. We'd rather people be able to get that lesson on a sand table rather than burn center, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a tough one, and I hear that a lot. And I had the same thing, you know what I mean? Like Nevada '99 entrapment, and oh man, I wasn't even 8 years in, like I was like 5 years in, and I was a hot shot, and I was pretty impressed with myself, and I had very little reason to be. You had way more reason to, like, you were making like super dialed decisions, and I think about that combination where we all are on that trajectory of confidence. That's a tough one, but I hear it a lot from people afterwards. Is like, hey, don't think it can't happen to you. And then the rest of the question is like, okay, so what does it look like to say, yes, this can happen to me?
Yeah, that's a tough question to think about. Yes, this can happen to me, because no one wants to admit that this could happen to them. It's tough.
Yeah, it's like trying out for something. I usually go in with the mindset of like, I will not quit and I will not fail, right? Like, I think that is setting me up for success. I don't know. It's true.
It's true. And I do the same thing. I've done the same thing my whole life, whether it be baseball teams, football teams, same scenario. But I have a theory. It's not really, it's my theory, that every firefighter goes through 3 phases. You got your sponge, your learning phase when you're, first, second, third year in, you're trying to soak it all in, learn as much as you can. Then you get to a point where you think you know it all. And then either you have a great leader or a situation happens, and hopefully it's not a serious one that snaps you back in, that you really don't know it all. You need to be continuing to become a student of fire. And I think that just from my observations of leading engine crews or folks on a fire, that's I've noticed over the years that I may be dumbing this down a lot. There may be studies out there on it. I don't know. But, I really think that there's very few people that go through life without having those three phases. Very few firefighters, unless they've got a really good leader that keeps them focused on, you don't know it all. You still need to keep learning. And the day think you know it all, that's the day you really need to do a self-assessment.
For sure. And so that it's the sponge on either end. Is that what you're saying? Like you at some point you stop collecting information or absorbing it, you know what I mean? Because you think you are saturated, right? And then there's an event that somehow makes you more receptive again. I see what you're saying. Yeah. And I think that happens in all kinds of things, right? Not just fire.
Right.
There's finances. Some people figure that out with finances.
That's a good
with
point.
Relationships or
big time with relationships for sure.
Oh my gosh, or just driving. Think about like when early on, right? When you're just very timid.
Yeah.
And then you start getting comfortable, and then you do something crazy, and you almost flip your parents' rig or whatever, and then
Yep. Probably shouldn't do that anymore. Yeah, no, that's definitely it.
Yeah, and then you do it again, right? Then you start getting confident again, and
kind of goes in those waves.
Yeah, for sure. But over a career, and especially that time period in our career where we're really in, like, it's like you described that fire season, and it's just like action, right? Like it's hard not to convince yourself that like you got this thing dialed.
I think that's those fire seasons where it's action is especially dangerous. And you think about it. We've been having those type of fire seasons for the last, I think we had one year in the last 5 years that has kind of been mellow. 4 out of 5 years, we've been going. It's hard not to fall in that trap,
Yeah, if you're living it and especially if you're pretty dialed and you did do some amazing things, like, it's you want the confidence. We all say that experience, and you get confidence, and there's a downside to that.
It's a healthy balance of confidence and humility. And I think that's where you got to take that. Yeah. But there's silver linings to this incident. We mentioned in the beginning because of what happened for me and DOI and what happened with the El Dorado Hotshots and New York Peak Fire. Both the DOI and the Forest Service came out with some clear direction, because we literally were put into a hotel room with a bottle of Vicodin pretty much and a case of beer. And I'm not joking.
Yeah.
Because the doctors in Elko, they'd never seen radiant heat burns. They didn't realize that 48 to 72 hours is when they show their true severity. Mm-hmm. And so I thank God for my FMO and my state FMO at the time. They put us on. They pretty much told the Serious Acts Investigation team that we were going to a burn center. And then there was no clear protocol, right? So they put us on a commercial airline back to the LA area and got checked in. I remember I went straight from the airport to the burn center, Grossman Burn Center down in LA. And they took one look at me and they were like, you're being admitted now. And I was like, it's not that bad. I was only told it was second-degree burns. I'm just here to get checked out. And they're like, no, you're going to need surgery. Austin, unfortunately, went to the burn center closest to his house up in Central California. And he wasn't getting the treatment that he needed. Mm. And it took the Wildland Firefighter Foundation to actually pay for his transport down to Grossman Burn Center 3 days later.
And you think about burn injury protocol, these things all come from someplace, and it's like, but they didn't do the medical incident report. Like Dutch Creek hadn't even happened yet.
Right.
Like that's crazy to think of now. We're talking about an event in 2006. Like Dutch Creek protocol couldn't be a thing because the Dutch Creek fire hadn't occurred. Like Andy Palmer was still alive. He was in high school.
Right. It's weird to look back and think about that.
And it also shows that, this is kind of how we learn stuff. The medical incident report, man, that makes reporting an injury so much better. And burn injury protocol didn't used to be a thing we said. Nobody knew, if you would have said that, people would be like, what are you talking about?
It's 100%. And during my incident, there was no burn injury protocol. Now, because of it, we are able to take better care of our firefighters, which is our number one goal. Big shout out to Ken Kempner. He was the biggest driving force on the Forest Service side. And I'd only met Ken once before this, but now we've become close friends, and I've worked for him. And there's a reason for that, because he really cared about, how we get our firefighters treatment and making sure we do the right thing. I think that was the step in the we'll do what's right culture that we're trying to strive for and that we're getting way better and closer at, but we're still not quite there. But we'll get, it's taken a long time. I mean, it's been over 15 years to get to where we're at now.
Yeah, and I think there's always these galvanizing events that get us headed in a direction, and then oftentimes what it takes is like, here's this event and there's all this emotion and people are like moved to action. But then it also takes like a champion to kind of keep it going, right? Because that momentum dissipates after the event, and and then maybe sometimes there's another event, and then it kind of gets people riled up again. But that's all part of the cycle of learning, both individually and organizationally, right? And it's so crazy. Like we were talking about, burn injury protocol used to not be a term. Like I don't ever remember hearing that.
It wasn't. It really was not. Our brothers and sisters in the structure, the municipal side had that, and they had that because of the structure fire stuff. But they were able to adapt that very well into the wildland game. We just didn't. We weren't there.
Yeah.
El Dorado was treated the same way. They had half their guys had to check themselves into burn centers, just like Austin and I did. It all happened, within a month of each other, almost a month to the day, all in northern Nevada. And it's like, man, what a way to test it out. And the other good thing that came from this is, and a lot of people ask, why do I have two caseworkers when I, dealing with the Forest Service side and Albuquerque Service Center, and then you're dealing with the Department of Labor, and it's because I had to deal with Department of Labor on my own. There was no one to advocate for me or tell me what I needed to do or how to maneuver it. At least our agencies are recognizing that and trying to assign us someone from the agency that can help navigate OWCP and Department of Labor and getting compensated for your time off and not having to worry about, when's my next, how am I going to pay the bills or rent the next month because I'm in a hospital, So that we've come a long way that way too.
Yeah, and there's a long way to go, and I think we all recognize that. But I think sharing our stories is a big part of that, and we have to. It's easy to get sucked into, the agency's bad and they don't take care of us, and I think we just we have to allow for us to grow. We definitely need to point out the flaws. Absolutely, we need to call a spade in those instances, and we need to recognize progress and then help. Right? Let's help us move forward. And I mean, and you're an example of that just by telling your story, but also by some of the things that you contribute to, right? Like, aren't you cadre for You Will Not Stand Alone?
Yeah. After this burnover happened, I'm like, I can't believe this happened to me. I really messed up. And I had an influential leader look at me and say, "What are you going to do about it?" I said, What do you mean you're going to do about it? And he goes, "You've been spared. You've gone through something that a lot of people don't walk away from. You need to do something with that because you've got a story to tell and you could be a change." So I always, because of that, I've been trying to seek out, You Will Not Stand Alone, making sure we take care of each other. That's the whole reason why I pursued trying to work for the Lessons Learned Center. I at the time of the burnover, the Lessons Learned Center was in its baby infinite stages. It was just still getting going, and I didn't really have that conduit to be able to give. There wasn't rapid lesson sharing. There was no FLA, So I'm so happy where we're at with that now, with a more of a just learning culture. So that, man, I want to get back. There's a reason why I made it. There's a reason why I decided to keep fighting fire as long as I have. I can't be a bump on the log. I got to be able to give somebody something so that it helps them, be better firefighter. And that's the biggest lesson that came out for me personally.
For sure, and everybody has that on a different scale, right? Like, right. It's like, obviously you have the one that's on the oh man, that guy's had to pull out the fire shelter, that's intense, But everybody has a version of some intense, or maybe not even intense, just an insight, right? Just a lesson that they have, and we can share that within our sphere of influence, whatever that is, and it can help sometimes grow your sphere sphere of influence. But remembering why you do it, I think is important. I would imagine it is for me.
100%.
You got any last little bit that you want to pass on?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is for anybody who has been in a close call or an entrapment, or even, tree felling accident, don't let it get you down. Always seek to help improve others with that experience that you've gone through. The first thing that I thought of when I deployed my shelter, literally as I'm getting my shelter, is like, how did I get here? And B, I really messed up. Mm-hmm. And that was hard. It was a really hard pill to swallow. And I'm very fortunate enough. I had some influential leadership that made sure that I didn't dwell on that and I didn't go down a deep dark hole. And so just for people that have had this, we're human. We are going to make mistakes. That's how we learn. Don't let that get you down. And there's other people out there that have gone through the same thing that you have or very similar that are here for you and that will, you can give me a call. You can email me.
Yeah, at that shared experience, just because you weren't there together, but so much of that aftermath can be similar. So much of those feelings of, I screwed up. I hear that from so many people, and I also hear that connection helps soothe that, however that connection is established, like you said. And I hear it from people that, yeah, call me, if they've come through it to the point where you're at. They're like, yeah, I want to hear from somebody. Or I've heard people say, man, just hearing that story or just reading that thing, it made me feel like I wasn't alone. And the events are like 15 years apart or something like that, but they still connect 100%. With it.
Yeah.
And investing in that connection for a whole bunch of different reasons, but what you're talking about, like just as a survival thing, right? Because
a mental health thing.
Yeah. Exactly, like huge. Mental health and survival, like same, right?
Yeah, right.
Whether it's reaching out or even just starting to allow yourself to believe that you aren't the only one, and that there's an ear out there somewhere, whether it's somebody that hasn't gone through it yet, and is willing to really invest in hearing your story, or somebody that has suffered a similar thing and felt similar things. That's important, man.
It's the biggest lesson that I think I could come up with for me personally. I really hope that I could encourage other people to do the same.
All right, Chris. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share your story. It's powerful, and you're doing good work.
Well, thank you, Travis, for giving me opportunity in this platform. It's helped me along in the healing process for sure.
Thanks to Chris for taking the time to share his story. So what'd you think? It's pretty amazing how fast things can change and how fast our instincts kick in. Do you and your crew train for quick decision making? I hope listening to Chris and his story will inspire some dialogue. Remember to visit our website to continue your study on the mud fire or to search for additional incidents from which you can learn. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you for listening to the Wildfire Lessons podcast. Be sure to subscribe, share, give us a review. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Wildfire Lessons. For more information, visit wildfirelessons.net. Music provided by second-generation smoke jumper Steve Baker, who always likes to keep one foot in the black. Thanks, Steve. Remember, we honor through learning.